My name's Michael Beck, and my story begins with my mother, who struggled with addiction her whole life. I was born addicted, and my biological father is unknown to this day. I was adopted with these wonderful people committed to raise me in a community of love and forgiveness and to know Jesus as my Lord. Ultimately, I made some bad choices, and my mom had kind of come in and out of my life and exposed me to some things, and I experienced some abuse and some of that growing up. And I dropped out of high school in the 9th grade and got involved in drug dealing and using and drinking alcohol and sexual relationships very young. Juvenile detention facilities, jails, rehabilitation centers was kind of my life. And I had an encounter with Christ when I was a teenager, and I just felt the conviction of what today I know to be the Holy Spirit. And I went into a bathroom and turned out the lights and got on my knees, and I prayed to Jesus, and I just broke, and all these things were just kind of pouring out, my sins. He kind of took me back and walked me through every sin that I ever committed and how I got where I got. And the presence of God came into that room, and I can't really describe exactly what happened. I was terrified and also greatly comforted. I felt accepted and loved, and I just kind of poured out my soul, and I felt like I was literally in the womb of the Holy Spirit, being reborn. And so the next day I went to that little church where I grew up and said, I think I had an encounter with God. And in one moment, I quit drinking, I quit smoking, I quit selling drugs, I quit all the gang activity that I was involved in. The pastor there happened to be a recovering alcoholic pastor. And he said, well, I'm glad that Jesus saved your soul, but AA will save your butt. So meet me at the noon meeting tomorrow. But I just had this encounter with Christ, and I was convinced I didn't need that, that I had this amazing transformation. So pretty much overnight, a lot like Paul the Apostle. One minute I was drug dealing and running around in the streets. The next minute I'm out there telling people about Jesus and passing out tracts. Went to college and started to be very successful and became a youth pastor. But then my grandmother, who was my adopted mom, died suddenly and unexpectedly. I just didn't have the tools or the support system to deal with that. And I felt betrayed and hurt and kind of abandoned. And so I turned my back on God and went back out for about another 4-year run of drugs, alcohol, insanity. And so my bottom experience happened in the Marion County Jail. I had a staph infection. I was down to about 100 pounds. I was very sick from methadone and opiate withdrawal and alcohol withdrawal and pretty much everything else. And I just started to cry out to God, and He came to me and He comforted me. And it was like Jesus was in that room holding me and nursing me through the withdrawals. And I would pray, God, please let the pain stop. And I would just fall asleep for a little while. And then I would wake up in this horrible, hellish kind of place, and I would pray, God, and He nurtured me through that whole thing. And that's what it took for me. And the way that I got there, I was a functional drug addict where I literally had to put a substance in my body just to get out of bed. So tired of that and going to doctors and trying all these different treatment approaches, finally I got on my knees and I prayed and I said, God, whatever you have to do to stop me, please do it. And so God answered that prayer with angels in green suits with handcuffs, who the next day arrested me. And I was very fortunate to just get 8 months in the county jail for the crimes that I had committed. And that 8 months was when they came into my cell and put this Christian 12-step book in my hand. And I started to read that book and to work through the process of the steps. There was also somebody who came in and facilitated the meetings in there, and so I started attending the class. Just about as long as there was daylight, I was studying and praying and just being really reformed from the inside out. That's where I took my first step and was introduced to the entire process of the steps. And so it took me 20-something years to work step one for the first time. And I really see the 12 steps as a scriptural design for living, so we never really complete them. And I work step one every day in different areas of my life.